Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Randi Hipper Show. I'm your host. Today, we have a very special guest, but before we say hello to him, we want to say thank you to Cipher for sponsoring this episode, empowering traders for almost a decade with the #1 indicator for your trading journey. And exclusively for today, we have a special code that you're going to use with my referral link. For the first 40 people that use it, you will get 40% off of Cipher exclusively today. And without further ado, we are going to introduce our guest. The gold bug himself, Peter Schiff. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm good, Randy. How have you been since we ran into each other in Dubai?
I am doing quite swell. For you guys that don't know, Peter and I actually met IRL in Dubai at the Binance KOL event, and that was very interesting. What did you think of Dubai in general, especially the Binance Blockchain Week event?
Well, I've been there a few times, so I've always been a fan of Dubai, especially at night. That's where the city really kind of comes alive with all the lights. But yeah, it was the first time I was there for a blockchain or Bitcoin conference, and it was a lot, smaller than the one I had gone to before in Las Vegas in May.
Oh yeah, Bitcoin conference is different.
But no, it was a interesting event. I met some interesting people, yourself included, while I was there.
Well, thank you for calling me interesting. I'm happy I met your interesting standards, Peter. But we want to rewind because I want to get to know you, Peter. Everyone just hears you ranting about Bitcoin and how gold is so much better. And of course, we're going to get there, guys. But we're going to rewind in the timeline. Go back to 20-year-old Peter. You were just coming out of high school. Maybe you were in college. What were you doing with your life? Tell us.
Well, I got out of high school at 18. So at 20, I was at UC Berkeley, Cal. As I guess a sophomore, but yeah, but my economic thinking, all of that was formed when I was younger because I was taught economics by my dad, who wasn't an economist by trade, but he understood economics. He was in the insurance business, the investment business. But he really understood economics, and so he taught me Austrian economics. And he was, a fan of the Constitution and the founding fathers, and so he, educated me to understand America and what it's all about, and to understand how the country is supposed to be governed, and to understand, capitalism and why it works, and so I've known that pretty much my whole life. So. I didn't learn the things that I know from my education, formal education. I learned it from my dad, and then from my own reading that I did, and then just, what made sense to me, just based on the foundation that I had to be able to formulate my opinions, just common sense from understanding the basics. And, you could figure stuff out on your own.
Oh, absolutely. I think I figured out a lot of things on my own without formal education. And what was your major? So were you in like economics as a major in college or?
Yeah. Well, no, I was a finance and accounting major at the business school. So I had a couple of econ courses, but I mainly just, argued with my econ professors or the TAs. They were generally Keynesians, or even in some cases outright Marxists. So, that's the American educational experience. That's why so many kids, unfortunately, graduate with an indoctrination rather than an education.
Oh, yes. And so you think it's just as bad now as it was then? Or do you think the education system, because you have kids that are around my age, correct? And so what do you think about the education system now?
Well, I think it's gotten worse.
I would agree.
I think it's worse today than it was. Hopefully AI can replace the whole thing. We can get rid of, government schools are a disaster, especially for the students. But they're a boondoggle for the administration and the teachers unions. They make a bundle off of this government, monopoly. Mm-hmm. But it's bad. You got anything government's going to do, it's going to do it bad. It's going to be expensive, and it's not going to be good. Which is why you want to limit government so that it does as few things as possible. right? That's why the framers called government a necessary evil. We need a certain amount of government, but just enough. When you have too much, that it becomes a big problem. And we got much too much government in America. We have had for decades.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, especially within the schooling system. You know, everything is skewed. And even when I was in middle school at the time when Donald Trump was first elected, and I remember there was only one teacher that liked him and just like put newspapers of him all over the classroom. But then most of the teachers were very against it to the point where they were almost in tears. And as a middle schooler, I was very confused because I was like, why aren't we understanding why this is such a big thing for our country and why half the school is upset and half of them are happy about it? I mean, even when you were younger, did elections matter to you that much? Like you're in your 20s, you're in college. Were people crying on the campus over elections? I mean,
well, look, I mean, I was a big Ronald Reagan fan because, he became president in 1980. I graduated high school in 1981. I used to have a poster of Reagan in my dorm room. And yeah, I would get some outrage sometimes if I brought a girl up to my dorm room and she saw Ronald Reagan there, The fact is, there weren't any holes there because I wasn't using it as a dartboard. So sometimes you'd end up with a political argument when that was not the purpose of coming back to my dorm room.
I don't really want to know the purpose of why she came back to your dorm room, Peter, but I would say that, politics, especially now in the dating world, is very important. Like if you are going out with somebody, you find out they're a Democrat when you're a Republican, it's a no-go. I've spoken to a lot of people that said on the first date, that's their question. And if they don't agree, then they can't date. I feel like that's a little bit sad, but I guess the same argument has existed since you were in college. And I guess
it really... I mean, I dated plenty of liberals, at Berkeley. I mean, if I excluded liberals from my pool of available women, it'd have been a lonely experience, especially since, when you're young, and that goes for women and men, but you have a tendency to start out very left wing, very idealistic and believe a lot of this socialist nonsense because you've never actually been in the real world. You haven't had a job or certainly haven't run a business. You're not paying taxes. And so you don't know, right? You just kind of think with your heart about, I care about this and I care about people. And so you're in favor of all these programs. But as you get older and experience reality and appreciate the unintended consequences of these programs, you tend to become more conservative, more libertarian or right wing. So, I can forgive an 18 or 19-year-old Democrat. Once they get into their 30s, if they're still a Democrat, I got a problem with that. I mean, you should have grown out of it by now. But
it's a phase.
But the big problem, Randy, is that there's not even that much difference anymore, really, between the Democrats and the Republicans. And so they're arguing over nothing. They agree on all the big picture stuff. They agree on big government. They want the government to run Social Security, Medicare, Obamacare, education. They want big government. They don't want any of these programs cut. And now if you look at Donald Trump, what he's done, he's in favor of all kinds of things that Republicans used to say was socialism. And now he's all in favor of it. He's a big government guy. He wants the government to be involved in almost everything. He wants to micromanage the whole economy, and then he wants to beat up companies. You're charging too much. You're gouging the customer. You're ripping people off. We need the government to come in. He doesn't want to cut any spending. He wants massive deficits. He wants massive money printing. He wants inflation. He wants to take control of the Federal Reserve. There's not that much difference between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. It's just all about kind of the way they package it and they brand it. But at the end of the day, Sanders and Trump have a lot more in common than they have opposite.
I do feel like it's all blending together. I wouldn't compare Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump, but maybe I'm just young and naive. Who knows? However, I do think social media plays a major role in politics nowadays, especially like a good example, especially for Gen Z is going, and I don't know if you're on TikTok, Peter, but if you're on TikTok and you're looking at the White House posts banger memes, like they are killing it over there. And that makes a lot of people my generation love the White House and love Donald Trump because they relate to us. How is like the messaging of politics like different for you, especially you were in college in like the, what was it, like the 80s, 90s? Like obviously there wasn't a lot of social media. There weren't like phones like we have every single day that we just have all the information right at our fingertips.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's part of the problem in that Trump is a populist. His message is aimed at the public that doesn't really understand economics. And so, what I'm doing, I'm trying to educate people so to understand economics. Trump is playing on their ignorance of economics. And, he's probably ignorant of economics himself. I mean, just because he made money, in real estate or he made money at The Apprentice or whatever, it doesn't mean he really knows anything about economics. And based on what he says, he's clueless. And, maybe he's surrounding himself with people who also are not that great when it comes to economics. But people just assume that they are. But he gets most stuff wrong. And most of the things that he proposes are wrong. But the message could resonate well on TikTok. There's a lot of things, and they can do research with AI and they can search all the internet platforms and they can see, like what's trending, what's resonating, what's getting people engaged and interested. And then they can tailor their message to appeal to that. So, you're going to get support. But the biggest problem that Trump is going to have is that despite the lies that he is telling every day about how great everything is, how we've got the hottest economy in the world, the strongest economy in the history of the world, the economy is weakening and inflation is the only thing that's strengthening. And so the economy is going to be the big issue in the midterms and in 2028 for the president. And I think that the Republicans will lose if economy is the issue, because the economy is going to be worse by all measures that matter to the voters. And when the voters go into the voting booth and the cost of living is much higher than it was when they elected Trump, and they're having an even harder time paying the bills, they got even more debt, they're going to vote for whoever's promising to solve their problem for them. And unfortunately, it's going to be a Democrat who's going to be even worse, right, than Trump. Trump's not good, but whoever follows him is going to be worse. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm kind of losing hope in the government overall because obviously, like, I agree with you in the fact that they just want to consolidate everything, and even the big banks are just getting even bigger, and the financial system's getting smaller and smaller, and just leaving out people like, the accredited investor laws. They're very exclusive of everyday people. So it's hard for us to even get a leg up. So when it goes back to the American dream, because like, I want to know, when did you get your first home? When were you buying your first property? Was it easy for you at the time to build your wealth to get there? As Gen Z, I think the American dream is almost dead. And to get a house for my generation is very, very difficult.
Look, I disagree that the American dream is owning a house. I think realtors invented that to sell people
propaganda.
Look, the American dream is that anybody, no matter how, what's the word I'm looking for? But no matter where they're born, no matter what their station in life, right? You could be born to a plumber, a mailman. You don't have to start from wealth. Humble beginnings. Maybe that's what I was looking for. But anybody can rise to the top. Anybody can succeed in America. See, before America, your parents pretty much determined your fate. I mean, if your parents were in business and they were successful, or if you were born into royalty, if your father was a baron or like an earl or something, yeah, you would be in the upper class. But if you were born to a peasant, you were pretty much destined to stay a peasant. You didn't really have any upward mobility. But America was different. Anybody can go from the mailroom to the boardroom. Anybody could become president of the United States. Didn't matter. We were a classless society. We didn't have any titles. It was a meritocracy. If you've got what it takes, if you hustle, if you work hard, the sky's the limit, right? That was the American dream, not buying a house. I mean, what the hell is that, right? I mean, that's all nonsense. But, I didn't even buy my first house until I was well into my 40s.
Really?
I rented. Yeah, look, I was renting. I didn't want to get tied down to a house, and then I thought houses were too expensive. And of course, the first house I bought, I still own it. And I mean, I've lost a fortune on that house, right? If you look at what I paid for it 12, 13 years ago, 14, and what it's worth now, it's more, but I put so much money into remodeling it, fixing it up. I've spent so much on property taxes and maintenance. It's a money pit. Now, I own property in Puerto Rico now, and there I've made a killing if I sell, because I happened to buy before prices went up 6-7-fold, which is kind of a rare thing to happen in real estate. But it was a convergence of supply and demand where all of a sudden everybody wanted to live in my neighborhood, not because of me, just because of the exclusivity of it. And, the prices went through the roof. A lot of your crypto friends bid up the prices too. They had all this money they made out of nothing. And so they used it to buy real estate. But look, I think that for most young people, renting is better than buying. And people say, oh, you're throwing money away on rent. No, you're not. You got to live somewhere. I mean, I don't throw money away on food, right? I mean, no one says that, hey, you should be a farmer. You should grow your own food so you don't throw money away at the grocery store. No, I'd rather have somebody else, deal with that. I don't want to have to slaughter the animals myself. I don't want to grow the crops. I just want to buy it. I have no problem wasting my money on food. And for most people, if you rent a house, you don't have to deal with the maintenance. You don't have to deal with the property taxes. You don't have to deal with the insurance. There's a lot of costs that you don't have to worry about, right? You're a homeowner. All of a sudden, a pipe blows up, something happens, and you get hit with a $10,000, $20,000 bill. A lot of people don't want that uncertainty in their life. They'd rather have a landlord that they can call and say, hey, you got to fix this, right? And so when you're a renter, you have a lot of flexibility like that. And just when you own a property, you got to pay all that. You got to pay the mortgage, assuming you don't have enough money to buy it for cash. So this is, we don't have to try to make it so everybody could buy a home. A lot of people are better off renting homes. And then the money you don't spend on maintenance and insurance and depreciate, all that stuff, you can invest that. You can invest it in your own business. You can invest in somebody else's business. But I didn't buy a home until I could actually afford it for cash. By the time I bought a home, I didn't even need a mortgage, right? And all my properties I pretty much bought for cash. So, I mean, I buy them because I have the extra money and I don't really need it. But for a while, people made money in real estate because of the bubble, because of inflation. Real estate prices were propped up and people took out government guaranteed mortgages. And, they got rich owning a home, but that's not how it's supposed to be. Homes, you should lose money on your house.
You should lose money on your house.
You should, because look, whenever you buy something new and you use it up, it loses value. Nobody expects to make money on their car. I buy a car. When I sell it, it's going to be worth less than what I paid for it. You buy a boat, right? You buy anything. You buy clothes. You want to go sell your used clothes on eBay. You're not going to get what you paid.
No.
If I buy a brand new house and I live in it for 10 years and use it, it's not worth as much as it was when I first showed up. I mean, stuff is worn out. Stuff needs to be replaced, right? And then stuff gets dated, tastes change. You ever hear of a teardown?
Yes, I've seen many of those in Brooklyn, just literally like a little shack type house selling for like $3 million and it gets torn down and something else right on top of it. Yes.
Because the house is worthless. It's the land. Now the land can hold its value, not the structure that you build on it. So the land itself, because there's a limited supply. And so if you own property in a area where there's a lot of demand, and, the land can hold its value, but the structure never holds its value. The structure depreciates like a car, like a boat, just more slowly, right, than those things, but they depreciate. But meanwhile, you have to pay property taxes. You got to pay insurance. There's a lot of costs to keeping a house, going. But so you can own real estate and land, and, it could go way down. I mean, maybe there was a factory that closed up, and now a lot of the jobs that used to be there are gone. what's the real estate worth? I mean, it can crash, so it's all different, right? There's a lot of risks in real estate. So people should not look at real estate, certainly your home, as an investment. It's an expenditure. You're paying to live someplace. Now, if you buy investment property, if I buy multifamily homes and I rent them out and they generate a good cash flow and I get a good return on my investment, that's different. That's an investment. But when you buy a house and live in it, you're not making an investment. You're spending your money on a house. That's what you've done.
Do you think you truly own a property when we have to pay property tax? Like let's say you bought your house in cash, but you're still paying property taxes. Is it really your home, or is it really your land, or is it the government's land?
Yeah, I mean, in effect, you're renting from the government, which is why I don't believe there should be any property tax on non-income producing property. So if I had my druthers, the only property tax there would be on office buildings, hotels, rental property. Because if I own property and it's throwing off rent, let's say I'm making $100,000 a year in rent, and they want to have a $20,000 property tax. Okay, I've got rental income, I can pay the tax. But if it's my own home and I'm just living there, and now I get a $20,000, $30,000 bill, what if I don't have the money?
Yeah,
now,
I'll agree with that.
They take my house from me. So I don't believe, and this Adam Smith wrote about this in Wealth of Nations a couple of 100 years ago. You don't tax non-income producing property. It's not fair. There are people who've lived their life in a house and they want to retire, but then they have to sell it because they can't afford the property taxes. And in most cases, 80-90% of the property tax goes to fund the government public schools. Well, what if you don't have any kids in school? Why are you paying to educate other people's kids, right? The amount that goes to the fire department or the police department is negligible, right? It's all for the school systems. And the school systems stink.
Yeah, and they're just indoctrinating everybody.
They should have those. Yeah.
I mean, in New York State, they're collecting city tax for New York City, state tax. And then I grew up in public schools, and I just saw how there was lead in all the water. They would send us monthly letters back home saying, hey, kids, don't drink this water, but you have the option to. There's just lead in there, just so you know. And then, the paint peeling everywhere, mice everywhere in a lot of these schools. Yeah, they don't do the upkeep. And especially where you have that property issue, yeah, I'm going to be with you on that one, because even if you're paying a mortgage, right, you're still owing money to the bank. So you're renting from the banks and from the government. So why don't you just rent from an actual landlord instead? And that's the battle I've been having personally lately, Peter, is that I'm 22. Do next year I go and I buy a condo, or do I keep renting an apartment? These are the struggles I think Gen Z is having right now to what we think should happen next.
So I didn't realize again that you were that young. So yeah, I got a son that's I think older than you by a year. I think he's 23.
You think you don't know for sure though?
Well, I was born in 2002. So what would that make him? That make him 23.
Yeah. I'm in 03. Yeah.
Yeah, 23.
So how does your son feel about growing up in the midst of all of this financial and political pressure? Because this is, again, something that I know my parents didn't worry about. They didn't worry about who was president and which country was getting bombed every day. I mean, how does your son feel right now?
Well, he's a bit of a anomaly, but he did go through his anarcho-capitalism phase. So he kind of went even further than me, and not just being a libertarian, but being an anarcho-capitalist. And so that was kind of his thing for a little while. And that was even before he got into Bitcoin. But now, now he's all about AI. And so he's one of these guys that believes that the world is going to be so profoundly changed by AI that, it kind of deflates his motivation to do things, because he just thinks that we're all going to be living in this world where nobody does anything, where the machines do it all, and the robots and it's going to be some, paradise of abundance. And so he's just very much follows everything that has to do with AI and all the developments. And he moved over to San Francisco to kind of be, at the epicenter of everything that's going on in AI. And so he doesn't really care too much about economics. He doesn't, because economics really is about how to satisfy unlimited human desires with limited resources, scarce resources. And he believes that resources won't be scarce anymore, that we'll just have an infinite amount of whatever we want. So, which makes economics obsolete, right? If I could just, think and everything I want just magically appears, I mean, we don't need economics at all, right? So I guess, and that's kind of the world that I think he thinks that we're headed towards. So
I think a lot of people think about like UBI, universal basic income, especially with AI. What a lot of these like one world governments and things like that want to do is just implement UBI and then have everyone just like follow all of these rules that they themselves, the 1%, don't follow. But I also want to go back to your 20s. When did you graduate college and where did you think your life was going from there? What was your first job post-college?
Well, I kind of interrupted my college for a couple of years. I had a summer job and then I ended up working with my dad. So I didn't graduate college till 87. I only went to college for 4 years. So it didn't take me more than 4 years to get my degree. But the whole time span between when I enrolled and when I graduated was 6 years, right? Because of those 2 years that I left. So then when I got out of college, I guess I was about 24. And then I moved back down from San Francisco area because I was at Berkeley. I moved back to Southern California, which is where I had gone to high school. And I worked down there. I was actually in Orange County for a while, in Newport Beach. And I was working first in commodities. I worked, with precious metals, then commodity futures and options. Then I became a stockbroker. And I worked as a stockbroker for a while. And then I kind of left and I set up my own brokerage firm, my own broker dealer. And that was kind of, the mid 90s when I set up my own Euro Pacific Capital was my broker dealer that I set up. And then I just operated that pretty much up until I moved to Puerto Rico when I kind of sold it. And I just continued my asset management business, Euro Pacific Asset Management, which, is a registered investment advisor. So I'm not a broker dealer anymore. I manage money. I manage separately managed accounts. We manage mutual funds. And along the way, I did set up Schiff Gold. I started selling gold and silver to my broker clients back in 2001, 2002. So silver was around $4, $4.50. Gold was, a little under 300. Now today gold's 4,600 and change. Silver's over $90 now. It's had a hell of a move just in the recent last few months. But I've been, encouraging my clients to always have an allocation to physical gold and silver. And as it turned out, gold and silver has outperformed even the stock market over the past 25 years. People have done better just buying gold and silver coins from me and putting them in a drawer than owning the S&P 500 and collecting all the dividends and reinvesting them. That's what's happened. And it's not really that gold and silver have gone up so much. It's just that we've destroyed the value of our dollar so much that you need a lot more dollars to buy the same quantity of gold and silver.
Yes, we love the money printer, Peter. It's definitely done all of us really well. And going back to when you were like in the stock market, what exactly were you doing with stocks? Were people calling you, asking you what to buy? Were you making the purchases for them? What were you exactly doing in relation to stocks?
Well, I was mainly getting on the phone and calling people and telling them what to buy. That was basically my job, really.
You were cold calling?
Yeah. I cold called to get customers. And then when I got customers, then I would call them with recommendations. I wasn't, a discount broker. So normally, if you're going to just come up with your own ideas, you don't need a full service broker, right? I would charge people commissions. And so I would come up with ideas and I would get on the phone and I would call up, John Brown and say, hey, it's Peter. Hey, I got a stock idea for you today. I'd like you to buy 10,000 shares. And if sometimes they would say, yeah, they would just trust me. And they'd say, and if they, well, what's the stock? What can you tell me about it? And here's why I'd give them a spiel as to why I thought it was a good stock and why they should buy it. And then if they bought it, I made a commission. And then sometimes I'd call up and say, hey, John, remember that stock I had you buy 2 months ago? It's up 20%. Let's get rid of it. I got a better idea. That was your job, right? To give people stock recommendations, what to buy, what to sell. hopefully they made money. That was the idea. They used to say, well, the broker makes money, the house makes money, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But I never really liked that environment, so I started my own shop because I wanted to put the customer first. I wanted to, because I was kind of a square peg in a round hole, at Schiff and Lehman, which is where I was working, Lehman Brothers. And so, I started recommending a lot of my own stuff because I think outside the box. And when you work, at a wirehouse firm, they don't really like it if you think outside the box. They want you thinking inside their box, which is fine because, I was an employee. I got to do what my employer wants, right? I mean, they own the business. I'm just an employee. I got to do what the boss tells me to do. But if I don't like what the boss is telling me to do, well, my choices are, well, I can keep doing it anyway and just suck it up, or I can quit and start my own company, which is what I did.
So when people would call you, you would make the buys like for the stock on their behalf, and then they just basically trusted you and sent you money. How were they sending you money to buy these stocks?
Well, they didn't send it to me. They sent it to Schiff and Lehman, right?
How were they doing that, through a check or a money order? We were owned by
American Express at the time.
Oh. So
yeah, it's a big
because
company,
my generation doesn't know how this works. We go on Robinhood and we click buy.
You guys, we didn't have any of that stuff back then. I mean, when I first started, I would write the orders down on a paper ticket. We called it a ticket. And I would write the order and I would have to give it to somebody who would call it in. I didn't even call it in myself. I took the paper, I gave it to, there was a cage. We had a cage, and in there they had the people because, that could get the order in. I mean, it wasn't all automated like it is now. Yeah, it was a very, very different world, back in the 1980s. When I was a stockbroker, go watch Wall Street, watch how Bud Fox worked. That was me.
I definitely have watched The Wolf of Wall Street, and it cracked me up, like how they did it.
I wasn't quite that bad. I mean,
no, you weren't like pimping out like that.
I mean, that was a boiler room. That was like a complete boiler room. Chop shop, penny stocks. I wasn't doing that.
You weren't that big of a degenerate, Peter.
But it was the same kind of sales pitch. I mean, Jordan Belfort, the sales pitch, that's how you cold call. I mean, they were great at getting on the phone because I used to prospect. I'd get on the phone with people, didn't know who I was from Adam. And at the end of the day, I'd get an order to buy $10,000 worth of stock. And trust them to send a check in because they didn't have an account yet. I would buy the stock and they would have to send in a check. And, we had a longer settlement period back then. We had T+5. So you really had a week to get the money in. And then I can get an extension. You give you another week. But normally, you'd start off with a very conservative blue chip stock so that, worst case, it's not going to go down that much. If they renege, right? If they didn't pay for it, then the firm would take a loss.
So would you advise
if the stock went down?
So you would advise a blue chip stock, and then you would get into like more of the degenerate type things after.
Oh, that's what they wanted me to do. That's one of the reasons I left. I didn't want to do that crap.
Okay, you wanted to be a real one. So when
they would try to get you to buy stocks that the firm made a market in, that they can get an extra profit. And I saw through that from a mile away. And I was like, look, I'm not going to sell that crap.
I don't like that, Peter.
I was good. I was good at what I did. I opened up a lot of new accounts. But I just didn't want to play that game. That wasn't what I wanted to do. And so that's why I went on my own.
When you went on your own, Peter, what was that feeling like? So you were like promoting stocks and like still cold calling people asking about stocks, or were you like diving into gold at that point?
Yeah. No, and if I had been dumb enough to buy a house in my 20s, I may not have been able to go off on my own because I would have had a mortgage to pay. But I didn't have a lot of overhead back then because for the first couple of years I owned my own business, I didn't make any money. Right. I had to go without income for a couple of years because, you're starting out, you're paying bills,
building reputation.
Nobody knew who I was other than my clients until, I started to go on TV and stuff in the 2000s. And I started writing a lot of stuff because then the internet came around, right? In the late 1990s, all of a sudden there was the internet. And I started using the internet to publish my ideas, my commentary, and put it on different websites. So, but that started in the later 90s, and then I started to build up a following, using television in the 2000s.
And this was all writing about gold. Or you
No,
were
I
writing
wrote
about
about
stocks?
economics. I mean, I told people to buy gold. I knew the price of gold was going to go up. I knew the central bank was creating a lot of inflation, and that would result in higher gold prices and higher silver prices. So I told people to buy it, right? Because I knew the price was going to go up. But most people on Wall Street completely ignored gold and silver because they didn't understand the dynamics that were at in play. They didn't understand what the Fed was doing to our monetary system. And they thought it was stupid to buy precious metals, right? They probably still think it's stupid. They don't understand why silver is $90 an ounce, why gold is 4,600. They expect it to crash. They think it's going to come down. They don't realize it's going to keep rising because they don't know why it's rising. So they expect it to fall. That's why I think these mining stocks are still so cheap. I mean, people should be buying these precious metals mining stocks, even though some of them have tripled and quadrupled over the last year.
Yeah.
They're still really cheap. They're actually cheaper now than they were before they went way up because their profits are going to go up a lot more than their share price has. But Wall Street is in disbelief. And I think, a great way for people to do that now is my fund, my gold fund. The no load symbol is EPGIX. That's an open-ended mutual fund that people can buy. EPGIX. We got a lot of junior miners that they've moved even less than the bigger companies. And I think they're going to start to move this year, probably later in the year, but it's a great time to buy them now.
So when you were going on TV in the 2000s, you were telling people buy gold, buy silver, and you were basically outsmarting Wall Street in your own words.
Right. Well, I was also telling people that there was a financial crisis coming. There was a housing bubble. I was telling people to short the subprime market. I mean, I was one of the few people in the mainstream media, and I used to be on every week, 2 or 3 times. I was on CNBC. I was on Fox News. I was on CNN. I was on MSNBC. I was on Bloomberg. I was on I was a regular guest on all of these financial talk shows. And I was like the only one that was saying things are bad. This is a bubble. We're headed for a crisis, a banking crisis. And people generally just all laughed at me because I was the only guy saying this stuff. But they brought me on because it was good television. They would get great ratings. Every time I was on, people, they would get more ratings. In fact, whenever there was like a ratings week, they all wanted me on because they knew that I was good TV. But after the financial crisis hit, it kind of slowed down. I mean, it's ironic. Like once I was proven right, I wasn't as interesting anymore to these networks.
I think everyone was panicking at that time. So 2008, financial crisis. What did you make of the whole situation? Were you just doubling down on gold at that point? Or were you just kind of laying low and just seeing if things right itself out?
No, I kept buying and then, we ended up having a big sell-off. Gold peaked out in 2011 at 1,900. Silver peaked out at 50. And, I was, not expecting 12 years of can kicking, but we managed to delay what I believe is the day of reckoning. I've always believed that we're headed for a U.S. dollar crisis and a U.S. Treasury crisis. And so far, we haven't had that. But I think that we are getting much closer to that. And I think what's happening now in gold and silver is a harbinger of a crisis that's coming. Just like when the subprime market blew up in 2007, it was a harbinger of the financial crisis that hit in 2008. And when subprime blew up, something that I had been anticipating and something that I had shorted, when it happened, I was like, okay, now, okay, this is what I've been expecting. It's going to get a lot worse. And that's how come when Wall Street and the Fed was saying it's contained, it's only a subprime problem, I knew that wasn't true because I understood the problem. The rest of Wall Street was clueless about the problem. That's why they were blindsided by the financial crisis. I wasn't blindsided. I had been expecting it for years. It just finally hit. Now,
so do you think this is all coming? Do you think this is all because of the Federal Reserve? I mean, is it all their fault?
Yeah, the Federal Reserve is the main architect of our problems. But, it takes two to tango. Congress and the president, the U.S. government, has been working with the Fed to create these problems. And all they do, all their solutions do is make the problems worse. They're just designed to postpone the consequences. But whenever they do that, they make the problems even bigger. And so the ultimate consequences are that much greater. And eventually you get to a point where you can't kick the can anymore, right? You run out of road, or the can is too big or whatever. And I think what's happening in gold and silver now reminds me of what happened to subprime in '07. It's a warning that all the things I've been forecasting for over a decade are about to happen. But the people who don't understand why this crisis is going to happen don't appreciate the warning that they're getting from gold and silver, just like they didn't appreciate the warning they were getting from subprime in '07. So I think people need to prepare themselves for a dollar crisis. U.S. stock market can be very weak. Tech stocks can go down a lot. Real estate, bonds, and crypto, including Bitcoin. People need to realize that what I am forecasting is a negative for Bitcoin. It's not a positive for Bitcoin. It is a negative for Bitcoin. Bitcoin will go down in the economic crisis that I am forecasting.
And you think out of everything that's going to survive, gold and silver is going to just skyrocket?
Well, not just gold and silver, but gold and silver have been around for thousands of years. I mean, they survive everything. But look, copper, nickel, lead, zinc, all these metals are going up. Commodities, agricultural commodities are going to go up a lot. Energy, oil has been cheap. It's about to get a lot more expensive. Look, when you have a currency crisis, real things maintain their value. Commodities that have a use maintain their value. Assets that produce real income maintain their value. And so farmland, income producing property, companies that generate a lot of income and pay a lot of dividends. These are real tangible things that maintain their value when paper is blowing up, right? And so that's what's going to happen. But see, like a Bitcoin is very similar to just paper, because Bitcoin's only use is to gamble on appreciation. You buy Bitcoin because you think the price is going to go up. And you think the price is going to go up because you think somebody else is going to pay more than you did. And they buy it because they believe the same thing. Everybody believes there's a greater fool who's going to pay a higher price. But while you're holding your Bitcoin, it doesn't generate any income. It doesn't pay interest. It doesn't pay dividends. You can't do anything with it. You can't eat it. You can't use it to power, your house or your car. I can't make anything out of it. So all I'm doing is holding it, hoping the price goes up. And those are the kind of assets that could collapse in value in the environment that I think is coming.
That's very first world of you, Peter, I have to say, because there's a level of ignorance to what you said. And to say that Bitcoin has no utility is just dumbfounding to me. I want you to put yourself right now in Iran. So in Iran, the government said no internet, no nothing, and is blowing people up, hanging people, murdering people on the street. Now, what people are using over there is BitChat, which is an app that allows people to communicate over Bluetooth and send Bitcoin back and forth to each other. Now, are you telling me that's not a use case for Bitcoin when there's literally a currency collapse? Like, the Iranian rial is literally worthless. So in the case of a currency collapse, you see Bitcoin is skyrocketing. How do you feel about that?
Well, Bitcoin's not skyrocketing. It's been going sideways for years. But first of all,
against the rial?
You don't live in Iran, so it's kind of irrelevant to you. But yes,
I don't think it's irrelevant to the people that are in the situation right now.
But you don't have to use Bitcoin. There are lots of other cryptos that you could use, and in fact, the best thing to use would be a stable coin. And there's plenty of those that you could get into. And in fact, the best stable coin, I believe, would be a tokenized gold. So I would much rather, if I was living in Iran, and I wanted to transact, kind of anonymously through an app on my phone, and I had a choice between buying tokenized gold, buying a token that's stable and backed to the price of gold, versus just buying Bitcoin, which could go anywhere and is backed by nothing, I would much rather have gold to use. So, Bitcoin is just one token, but there are thousands and thousands of other tokens that could be used instead of Bitcoin. And there's much better tokens if you get it backed by something. I'd rather have something backed by something. Like if I'm going to use paper currency, I'd rather have paper currency backed by gold than paper currency backed by nothing, right? Fiat currency is not as good as legitimate currency. Bitcoin would be a fiat cryptocurrency. I'd rather have real cryptocurrency. I want to have a cryptocurrency backed up by real money. And that can do exactly the same thing. In fact, and I'm going to be setting this up, myself too at T-Gold. People can go to tgold.com and set up an account with me. We're going to be tokenizing gold. But the tokens that we're going to create, to the extent that people want to withdraw them, it's going to be a lot cheaper to transact in those tokens than in Bitcoin. And the transactions will happen much faster. Bitcoin can be very slow, especially, if more people actually want to use it. But, fortunately, fewer people are going to be using it. So maybe the cost will go down. But, when you want to talk about, who's ignorant, I mean, you just mentioned that you're 23 years old. And, you're only 23. Your life experience is somewhat limited. You will be a lot wiser with a lot more experience when you're 33, when you're 43, when you're 53, or when you're 63 like me. And so if one of us is ignorant or missing something, it's more likely that it's you.
So you're telling me I'm ignorant when I am someone that started from nothing multiple times and built my whole brand for 6 years, and I'm ignorant. What do you mean
multiple times? You're 23. How many times could you have gone broke?
I had my bank account drained a year ago, and I started from zero. That's how I went broke. So and then I had to rebuild my wealth.
I started from zero too. I just started a long time ago.
Okay, so you're telling me that if you're in a environment like Iran and the currency has collapsed, it's worth nothing, then you wouldn't go to Bitcoin and you would run to tokenized gold, which essentially is like a trust me bro. Because you're saying it's a trust me bro. Because let's say
Bitcoin is a bigger trust me bro.
How? When Bitcoin is verifiable energy, there's a reason for its creation. It is. It's energy powered computers that get rewarded with Bitcoin.
That is a Michael Saylor a talking point. Bitcoin is not energy. You need energy to solve the mathematical equation that results in a Bitcoin. But the Bitcoin itself is not energy. The energy is gone when you get to Bitcoin. Now, in contrast to gold, if I mine gold, I use energy to mine gold, just like you use energy to solve a math problem to create a Bitcoin. But after I've expended that energy, I have now dug up an ounce of gold and I've put it into a form where it can be used. It can be used by all sorts of industries that need gold. And it can be used by central banks that need gold, by investors that need gold, by jewelers who need gold. And so I've turned energy that has value into a precious metal that also has value. I've converted energy to metal. But when you use energy to solve a problem to create a Bitcoin, you've wasted the energy, because at the end of the day, you have nothing. You have a worthless string of numbers that can't be used by anybody. The only thing you could do with Bitcoin is give it to somebody else. But that doesn't count because they can't do anything with it either, except give it to somebody else who also can't do anything with it.
So you're telling me I can go to Dunkin' Donuts and shave off a piece of a gold bar and ask for a donut? The answer is no. Nobody's going to accept that.
Well, they're not going to take your Bitcoin either. I don't
There's
know
a
any
lot of
Dunkin'
stores
Donuts that take Bitcoin. I don't know any Dunkin' Donuts that take Bitcoin, but
actually through a service, yes, they do accept Bitcoin. Yeah.
What do they do?
They do accept Bitcoin through an app called Flexa. So I can load up my wallet.
Yeah, but you can do the same thing. Yeah, but you could do the same thing with my T-Gold. So you can have an account at T-Gold and you can walk into a Dunkin' Donuts and you could take your T-Gold and use it to buy a donut. And, the T-Gold can be sold instantly, converted to dollars to pay the donut people. Or if the donut people actually want your gold, you can immediately use an app on your phone to pay them, whatever, half a gram of gold or whatever the donuts would cost. But you don't have to scrape the gold off of a bar. I can transfer ownership of my gold through an app on my phone instantly for next to nothing. I could do it better than with Bitcoin. The difference is when I transfer ownership of gold, I'm transferring something of value. When you transfer Bitcoin, you're transferring nothing. Yes, there's a price. Somebody will buy a Bitcoin now because they are under the delusion that the price is going to go up. But eventually, when people stop believing that Bitcoin is going to go to the moon, people aren't going to want Bitcoin. And then what's the price? Zero? People don't want it anymore. People will always want gold. Businesses that need gold will always want it.
I don't believe that's true because again,
their currency will always need it.
But you can go back again to these third world countries where there are currency collapses and they can't get gold. Because if they have gold and they're carrying gold on their back, that's a physical risk. Do you agree?
They can buy a gold-backed token the same way they buy Bitcoin. You can buy Pax Gold right now. You can buy Tethers. Tether has a gold token you can buy. Why do you have to buy Bitcoin?
Because it's verifiable. Every single Satoshi is held accounted for on a blockchain. Okay, but you
Tether is verifiable?
Tether is verifiable, but again, it's all a trust me, bro. Because at the end of the day, how do I know where all of their reserves are? How do I know where you're saying that you hold your gold for like Schiff gold or your tokenized gold in a closet somewhere? How do I know it's actually there on a daily basis? How do I know it's accounted for?
Do you have automobile insurance?
Yes.
So you trust the insurance companies that it's trust me, bro? I mean,
if I don't have car insurance, I get in trouble.
Huh?
I get in trouble if I don't have car insurance. You basically need to have car insurance.
Well, do you have fire insurance or, do you have any other insurance products? Health insurance?
Well, I'm forced to get renter's insurance because again, that's a requirement for my complex.
Right. But, maybe you have on your car, do you have comprehensive or do you just have liability?
I think it's liability. I'm not too sure. I have to go double check my policy.
But look, the point I'm making is everybody who buys insurance trusts the insurance company. Now,
you're kind of forced into it, but
even if you weren't forced into doing it, people buy insurance and they trust the counterparty. People buy annuities. People do a lot of things with counterparties. You put your money in a bank, right? Again, you're trusting a counterparty. But you don't just blindly trust a counterparty. You do a little research. You look into the counterparty. Are there any reviews? Have people had any bad experiences? Have they had good experience? How long have they been in business? Do they have a history of paying claims and being honest, right? In a capitalist system, companies compete for goodwill. They compete for branding. It's a valuable asset. So that trust is earned and built up over time. So if you're going to buy tokenized gold, you want to make sure that the custodian is viable. They've been around, they have a track record, they have a history, and of course, they can also be audited. So you can have extra security. You could say, hey, every 3 months, we have an independent auditor that checks every bar of gold and makes sure it equals exactly the tokens that are out there. And we put the audits on the internet so everybody could look. Look at Brinks, right? Brinks is one of the oldest gold custodians that we have. It's been in business, I think, for about 160 years. And over those 160 years, they have not lost a single ounce of gold. So nobody.
How do we know that? How do we know that?
Well, we know that. Research it. Nobody who gave their gold to Brinks didn't get it back, right? They were there, right? So they have a long history. Now, maybe they lost some gold somewhere. Maybe some was stolen, but they personally made it up. Maybe they have insurance for that, right? They buy insurance in case some of the gold gets stolen, right? But they find a way to maintain that brand that nobody's ever lost their gold with Brinks, right? So that's how capitalism works. But I'm fine trusting third parties. They don't have all my gold, right? You should store self-custody, a lot of your gold and silver, keep it for yourself. But the gold and silver that you want to use, if you're going to use it to buy donuts, right? Well, there you should use tokenized gold. It's a lot easier. And if I'm a donut shop, I'd rather get paid in gold than fiat. That's much sounder money. I'd rather have that.
So you're telling me that you're telling me that if I go and I get your tokenized gold, I have to trust that somebody is auditing your stash every month. So you're telling us you're going to put out transparent pictures of your whole vault. Let us see the vault. Let us see that this gold bar came off the shelf and you did one of those tests to verify that it was real gold, and then you had somebody report on it. Is that what's going to happen? Because
Well,
that's the
I'd
only way.
rather-
Like Fort Knox
look,
is
but
like up in the air. Nobody knows if there's really gold in
The
Fort Knox.
alternative is I put my faith in a string of numbers that
Well,
was
it's
just
verifiable.
concocted out of thin air.
It's verifiable. It's an immutable
Who
ledger.
cares?
What
You're
do you mean, who
verifying
cares?
nothing.
I'm
You're
verifying that
verifying
a
nothing.
transaction went through. There's a timestamp.
Yes, there's a timestamp.
And there's
It
and there's
shows-
a system that prevents double spending, and you know when
I
you
know
receive
that.
Bitcoin
I
that it's
know all that.
actually
I
that
knew-
real amount. I don't know
I
if
knew
the
all that
gold in your closet is real.
I knew all that before you did. Yes, it's all very clever.
I don't like
Yes,
how
you
you're
can't-
insulting my intelligence, Peter. Like,
No, you're
come on.
You're a smart gal. You just need more experience, more
Experience,
real
because
world-
I'm telling you that your closet of gold is not verifiable, but my every single Satoshi on the blockchain is verifiable. Is that correct?
I agree with you. They're verifiable. You can verify that you own nothing. Absolutely. Right.
You think, let's put this into real perspective though, because you believe that my Bitcoin in my wallet is not more tangible. In my mind, it's a lot more tangible because I actually have ownership and I can move my Bitcoin, versus if I'm in the banking system and it says I have a magical 100K, let's say, in my bank account, but I go and ask for the cash and they don't have it. It's an IOU at that
I'll
point.
tell you something
so
that you might
that's not
know.
verifiable. That's not real. But Bitcoin is real.
The Bitcoin isn't in your wallet, and the Bitcoin never moves anywhere, right? It just stays exactly where it is, which is nowhere. But it doesn't actually move. What changes is who can access it. That's what happens, right? It's not going anywhere. It just means that you can access it, and then you change it so that somebody else can access the Bitcoin. But it's not like it's going from place to place and traveling around. It doesn't travel anywhere. But the point is that what you have, the transactions that you're keeping track of, at the end of the day, the token itself doesn't have value. The value that it has is what buyers want to ascribe to it, right? So if people believe that Bitcoin has value and they're willing to buy it, there'll be a price and there'll be a market, no question about that. But what drives the demand for Bitcoin? What drives the demand is the belief that the price is going to go up and I'll be able to sell it for more than I paid.
No, you have the wrong idea. Like, that's a very narrow-minded idea. Why was Bitcoin created? For currency collapse? You could look at the Genesis block and see that Satoshi wrote a message.
It's not being used that most of the Bitcoin now is bought by ETFs. It's bought by Bitcoin treasury companies. It's stored with third parties. It's not being used as a currency. It's not.
It is. There's literally people in Iran that their currency is worthless and they're transacting in Bitcoin.
You're talking about a tiny fraction of the demand. So,
but what about there's so many third world countries that are using Bitcoin right now? That's absolutely ridiculous of you to say, and especially because again,
Bitcoin. If all the investors and speculators got out of Bitcoin, and so the only people that were using it are, the people in Iran or these other countries, what do you think the price would be? I mean, it would be well under 1,000, maybe under 100. The demand is coming from speculators. It's coming from hoarders, hodl, right?
So are people not hoarding gold in hopes that it goes up? Because it's an asset that anyone can mine at any point.
No, it stores its value. Look,
it takes 5 to 10 years for someone to get a permit to mine gold. Why would I take that long to mine gold?
More than half the people who own Bitcoin live in the United States, right? They're not in Iran. They're in America, right? Why are Americans buying Bitcoin? The dollar works perfectly well for transactions. If I want to go to the supermarket, they'll take my dollars, no problem, right? People are buying Bitcoin in America because they think they're going to get more dollars. They think they're going to buy Bitcoin for $90,000 and sell it for $1 million. That's why they're buying it.
Again, that's very first world, because there's a lot of other people outside the United States that use Bitcoin to save their purchasing power when there's triple digit
No,
inflation.
no.
And if you're, let's go back to what you said,
That's
where
a
you were
small
saying that
percentage.
like,
That's
okay,
a
but it might be
small
a bigger percentage. You're going and saying that the dollar is going to collapse. So when the dollar collapses, you think I'm going to have a backpack full of Bitcoin so someone can come and a backpack full of gold so someone can come and kidnap me and shoot me for my gold in my backpack. That's not smart. I need Bitcoin. It's discreet. No one can touch it.
First of all, if you had a backpack full of gold, you'd be very, very rich. You'd be, you're not going to have a backpack full. You could probably fit all the gold you can afford in your purse, right? That's how valuable gold is. So, you're not going to have to lug it around in a big backpack, right? Just put it in your purse and, you'll have plenty of money. But look, I think that Bitcoin is going to crash before the dollar. So there could be a Bitcoin collapse before there's a dollar collapse. That could be a big problem for people in Bitcoin.
So you're saying the dollar, so again, you think the dollar is going to collapse and Bitcoin won't survive. Why? And gold will. Why? You think people are going to go ahead and give like tokenized gold everywhere because Peter said there's gold in his closet. So we got to give like a few dollars of gold to other people. That doesn't make sense.
Gold has been around for thousands of years, so it doesn't matter what I say, right? Bitcoin has been around for 15, 16 years. But most people didn't even know about it until about 4 or 5 years ago. And most of the people who own Bitcoin bought it in the last 4 or 5 years. There's not that many people that got in, right after Satoshi wrote the white paper. Most people didn't buy Bitcoin at $1 or 10 cents or even $100 or $1,000. They bought it at 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. That's where the average person who owns Bitcoin, that's where they're in. And so the amount of time that Bitcoin has really been, a part of the financial world is very, very short. It has a very minimal track record. So to make any projection as to why should Bitcoin survive? Yeah, why should it survive? It doesn't have any history of surviving anything. Bitcoin has never been through a crisis. It's just, it's brand new. It's not
you
tested.
could say 2020 was a crisis to a degree. Like the stock market just nuked and then Bitcoin still made highs in 2021.
No, the stock market went down a lot and Bitcoin went down more. And then the stock market came back and so did Bitcoin. Bitcoin acted just like the stock market in 2020. It didn't act like anything else. It just did what the stock market did. It's a risk asset, right? It's not a safe haven asset like gold. It's the opposite of gold.
So is 1
it's
ounce
very volatile and very risky.
So is 1 ounce of gold equal to 1 ounce of gold, where 1 Bitcoin is actually equal to 1 Bitcoin because, again, there's a finite supply. So is 1 ounce of gold really worth 1 ounce of gold when you could continue to jack up the supply of gold? No.
Well, I agree. 1 ounce of gold is worth an ounce of gold, and 1 Bitcoin is worth 1 Bitcoin, which is
But $1 is not always equal to $1, again, because the dollar continues to die.
$1 will always be $1. The question is, what will you be able to buy with that dollar, right? The dollar today is not the same as the dollar 100 years ago because you need about 100 times more dollars today to buy what a dollar used to buy back then. But it's still, the dollar is still a dollar. It just buys a lot less. And, but gold is still gold. It just buys a lot more,
So what about if we're going to go like macro? So what if I had 1 Bitcoin in 2010 versus 1 Bitcoin in 2026, or 1 ounce of gold in 2010 versus 1 ounce in 2026? How much more can I buy with Bitcoin than gold?
Yeah, if you happen to buy Bitcoin back then, and if you were to sell it now, you would have made a speculative gain that exceeds the increase in the price of gold. That would be great. But if you bought Bitcoin a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you're much worse off. If you were to sell your Bitcoin now and buy gold, you would have a lot less gold because you bought Bitcoin. So yes, there is a time period where if you bought Bitcoin and sold it, you could have profited. But I mean, you can say the same thing about
gold.
What if I bought Beanie Babies? I could have bought Pokemon cards at a certain point, or there are a lot of things I could have bought and made a bunch of money on them. It doesn't mean anything. Yes, if you bought Bitcoin early on, you had an opportunity to sell it. Now, the problem is a lot of people are going to stay too long in the casino. Like a lot of people are not going to sell their Bitcoin because they think it's going to go to 1 million and it's going to crash. And now people are going to end up with a lot less, right? They had the opportunity to sell, but they never took advantage of it. They were too greedy. They held on, and they're going to end up watching all of their paper gains evaporate. And by the time most people sell their Bitcoin, they'll end up with less dollars than they started with.
I think your barrier is that you think that people aren't going to value the Bitcoin as currency over like the dollar or gold. Because in my head, I'm like, okay, well, I have my Bitcoin, and if the dollar dies or my bank says I'm not letting you in today, then at least I have money that I can spend, that I can move. That's actually
you don't
mine.
have money. You have Bitcoin, and I understand what's in your head. You have a lot of nonsense in your head. That's the problem, but you know what? This is going to be a valuable lesson for you. See, the best part about this is that you're only 22 years old. And if you get wiped out, and let's say you lose all your money in Bitcoin, and when you're 25, you're broke, guess what? You have a whole lifetime to earn that money back. And now you've earned a valuable lesson to prevent you from losing all your money in the future when you're a lot older and have a lot more money, right? So that's the key. If you're going to lose money, lose it when you're young, because you have time to make it back, and you can learn the lesson from the loss. You'll end up smarter. You'll end up wiser, so that when you're my age and some young kid comes around, believing a bunch of nonsense, you'll be able to say, let me tell you, son, when I was your age, I believed in this thing called Bitcoin. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but God, was I a fool? I lost all this money, but it was all the rage, and a lot of other people believed in this con, and this is what happened. And so, you can impart your wisdom like I'm doing now, right? Trying to help you. You can do the same thing when you're my age and you're confronted with younger people who are wrong about something. You want to give them the benefit of your experience and the wisdom that you've gained over the years that you've been in the investment industry.
I really want to see your point, Peter, but I just know that if I'm fighting for freedom, right, and you seem like a patriot, Peter. I have to admit, you seem like a patriot, but then you go and you say that you're like anti-Bitcoin, which makes no sense, again, because it's trustless, which makes it trustworthy because it's verifiable. And again, you look at the Genesis block where Satoshi put a headline in there, Chancellor on the brink for a second bailout for banks, which is a message. And so if I'm in a place that's dangerous and I need to leave, but I also need to let people know what's going on, and I could inscribe a message on the blockchain, you don't think that represents freedom of speech, purchasing power to make a move and get out of a dangerous situation, currency collapse?
I believe in freedom and liberty, and I believe that you have the right to throw your money away on Bitcoin. I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but I also want to do what I can to prevent people from making the mistake that you're making. I just look at it as a decentralized Ponzi scheme. It's a pyramid. It's a chain letter. I believe that the people who are owning Bitcoin are going to end up broke. I mean, if that's all they own. I mean, look, if somebody has a small percentage of their net worth in Bitcoin, it's not going to matter if they lose the money, right? It's the people who are very overweighted, have a lot of Bitcoin or almost all Bitcoin. They're the ones that are going to really get hurt. And I'm trying to prevent that from happening. In fact, if some people are, watching your podcast or listening to podcasts, and you're somebody that's pretty much all in on Bitcoin, at a minimum, what you need to do is sell some of it, a good chunk of it. You don't have to sell it all. I'm not telling you to just have no coins. You can have some, right? But you don't want to be in a position where that's all you got, where you're just betting the farm on Bitcoin. And if it comes up, craps, you're gone. You got to take some chips off the table, and you got to invest in some other things so that you're not wiped out if you're wrong about Bitcoin. If you're right about Bitcoin, you still make a bunch of money because, you still own some. I'm not telling you have to sell it all if you're a diehard Bitcoiner. Yeah, keep some of it. But make sure that if it collapses 90+%, that's not all you got. Because then you're going to have to sell what you have left to pay your bills. So, have some other assets, have some gold and silver, invest in some stocks, good dividend paying foreign stocks, buy some income producing property, own some real things. Don't, Michael Saylor's out there telling
diversity is basic.
People,
you know?
Huh?
Diversity is quite basic, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
So make
you should
sure you
always
diversify. Bitcoin is very, very risky. And there is a high probability that it goes close to zero. So bear that in
Peter,
mind.
if we've been listening to you for years and you're telling us like Bitcoin is garbage, we would like, a lot of us would be broke out here missing Bitcoin at a few grand when you started trashing it. And like now it's like about what, 95, 97K today? I mean, like we're missing out on a lot of gains listening to you.
Most people who own Bitcoin would be better off if they didn't buy it and had they bought gold and silver instead. No, that's true. Now,
come on, Peter.
Come on. Most of the people who own Bitcoin didn't buy it 10 or 15 years ago. That's reality.
Okay, but like you could have bought Bitcoin, gold at like 3K and then now it's 4. And then, if it goes down, like you could say it's the same thing. You're picking and choosing time frames that aren't relevant.
Lo, I'm using the time frames that are relevant.
That benefit your narrative.
Look, a lot of people didn't own Bitcoin until the ETFs came on the scene. Bitcoin ETFs. Now, had everybody who bought a Bitcoin ETF, had they bought a gold ETF or a silver ETF instead, they would be a lot wealthier today. They would have a lot more money. They made a mistake buying Bitcoin. Had they listened to me, they would be better off. Now, yes, had you listened to me 10 years ago or 15 years ago and bought gold or silver instead of Bitcoin, you're worse off. Yes, I accept that. I acknowledge that. But most of the people did not, hear that. And in fact, a lot of people tell me who did buy it 10 or 15 years ago, they say, you know what? I bought Bitcoin because of you, right? You educated me. You taught me about sound money. You told me to buy gold, but then I researched Bitcoin and I bought that instead. So they thank me, even though I told them not to do it. But the people who listen to me in recent years are better off if they didn't buy Bitcoin. Now, the question is, are the next 5 years going to look like the last 5 years, or are they going to look like the 10 years earlier, right? You don't know. You don't know, is Bitcoin going to go from 90,000 to 9,000 in the next 5 years, or is it going to go from 90,000 to 500,000? You don't know.
Or
You're
gold
just making a guess.
Or gold could just go straight down too, because if someone finds a major mine and it increases the supply,
that ain't gonna happen.
What do you mean?
Oh yeah,
the reason why it doesn't happen is because the governments corrupt the whole system and don't give people permits. And then again, it takes you 5 to 10 years in the U.S. to get a permit to mine gold. So let me just wait until I'm 40 to have a chance to mine some gold.
Most of the gold is not necessarily mined in the U.S., right? It's mined all over the world. I mean, we mine some. We have gold mines, but.
So you're touting the U.S., but like most of the gold is mined elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, but it takes a long time. There hasn't been a major gold discovery in over a decade. So it takes a long time to find gold, get gold out of the ground. There isn't going to be a big increase in the supply of gold. There's going to be a big increase in the demand for gold. That's for sure. But supply is going to grow rather slowly. I mean, we know that from hundreds of years of history, if not more. But Bitcoin, yes, Bitcoin has a limited supply of 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. That's the limit, right? There will never be more than 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. If you think that sounds scarce, I don't know. It seems like it's pretty abundant to me. But the problem with Bitcoin is that there's so many other cryptos I could buy instead of Bitcoin. I don't have to buy Bitcoin. I could buy all kinds of other things. And I could buy cryptos that are backed by things like tokenized gold. So there's a lot of other things you could buy if you're, into that. You all like meme coins or all kinds of stuff that you could buy that's not Bitcoin. And you also have to worry about quantum computing and, what the hell happens if the whole code gets cracked. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and then so there are a lot of people want to think, what happens if we find an asteroid made of gold? I mean, it's more likely that somebody cracks Bitcoin than that happening.
I feel like if that was going to happen, it already would have won. And two, like that's a non-existent problem, which is propaganda. That literally doesn't exist.
No, I look, computing capacity is always increasing. The computers are getting smarter and faster. And so who knows? Who knows? But I think Bitcoin will self-destruct before that even happens. I think the bigger risk to Bitcoin isn't that, AI or, the quantum computing cracks it. It's that the bubble just bursts and the air comes out of it all by itself. Bitcoin is its own worst enemy because it's an accident waiting to happen.
Oh boy. I mean, I don't know how many metals are out there and, the corruption that's behind the pricing. I mean,
there's not that many.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the price of gold, I mean, is more speculative than Bitcoin because there's not a finite supply of gold. And it's again controlled by the government.
Finite supply, but there's a very limited supply. It's not finite, but it's limited, right? And
the amount of gold being mined has been going up. Like there's more and more gold being mined, but over time there's less and less Bitcoin being put into circulation.
Yeah, the supply of Bitcoin of gold increases at about the same rate as the population of the Earth. So if you want to look at it that way, the supply of gold per person is pretty constant over time. We get more gold, we get more people. So and gold works. I mean, gold's worked as money for a long time. In fact, the most prosperous period of American history, where we had the most rapid economic growth, happened during the purest period of the gold standard, when gold was money. So economies function very well when gold is acting as money.
Yeah, I mean, Listen, I guess so. I guess we just got to keep trusting that there's gold in Fort Knox and that the gold in your closet is real. And I guess we just got to keep trusting people. I don't trust nobody. That's why Bitcoin.
Well, not today, because the U.S. government doesn't promise to give you any gold for the Federal Reserve notes, right? It's not backed by gold anymore the way it was. But no, you'd have to go out and buy your own gold, buy your own silver. You don't have to trust the U.S. government. Just go buy your own gold and silver. And hold on to it. Now, as far as what I'm talking about with tokenized gold or T-gold, let's say somebody has $100,000 worth of gold. They could take 5,000 of it and put it on a blockchain and have tokens. And then they can use that for medium of exchange. You don't put all your gold into a third-party custody. You can keep a lot of it yourself. And then if you run out of that gold because you've spent it, now, of course, you buy and sell, right? So I'm spending gold, but I'm also getting paid in gold. So I got gold going every way, right? I'm using gold to settle transactions. So if I buy something, I pay gold. And if somebody pays me, they can pay me in gold. Like you can have a salary, your boss, let's say you have a job and you're earning $5,000, $10,000 a month. You can have your employer directly deposit tokenized gold into your wallet. And now you've earned gold as wage, and now you can use that gold to buy groceries, to pay your rent, all that stuff. And but the gold that you want to save, that you want to keep, larger amounts, you can pull that out and put it in, your own vault or bury it in your backyard or do something with it. You don't have to trust anybody, but you could use gold as money, right? You don't have to use the government fiat currency. You can check out of that system. You don't have to use a fractional reserve bank. You can bank yourself using gold. And you can do that with a lot greater degree of certainty than with Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, you're just taking a big chance.
So I'm moving. So with Bitcoin, you're saying I'm moving nothing to nowhere, but with tokenized gold, I'm really moving gold because you say it's in your reserves. And I want to know, because I genuinely am curious. How are you gonna tell us that all the gold in your reserves are real? Be so upfront with us. Tell us if there is no way, there is no way, but at least tell us the truth.
So first of all, the gold itself doesn't move. What moves is the ownership. So when I own a token, right, that token signifies that I own that gold. If I send the token to you because I paid you for some services that you provided or some goods you sold me, or I just gave you a birthday present, I said, here, happy birthday, here's some gold, and I send you the token, now you own the gold. And the token is proof that you own the gold. You can go and redeem it. You could take the gold if you want, or you can, give it to somebody else, sell it, use it, to buy something or gift it. Now, how do you know the gold is there? Well, let's say other people have redeemed their gold and they got it. Let's say all of a sudden you start hearing reviews on the internet. Hey, I took my gold token to Schiff Gold and they didn't have anything. All right, well, the cat's out of the bag, right? I mean, people are going to review their experiences,
So we got to wait
I
for
can
that?
also, I can have an auditor. I can hire a big 8 accounting firm, highly reputable firm that can go in and look at my vault and just count up the bars, look at the serial numbers, see what I have. I went to the vaults for, T gold, and we checked it out. And yes, there's exactly the right amount of gold that backs up every single token that's been issued, and you can have that. And we can have, there could be cameras in the vault. They can show, hey, here's the gold here, here's the bar that because each token is going to be linked to a specific bar, exactly, oh, my token is that bar right there, right? I mean, so it's real and it works.
So
But
I have
Bitcoin,
to trust that some guy pulled up to your place and said, "Yeah, that's real." So would you let people be able to come and see it? Like if you said you announced T Gold and you were like, "Randy, come through," would you let me go to your vault and let me see the gold and test it?
Yeah, we could arrange tours of the vault. Obviously it's going to be secure. We got to make sure you're not going to rob us. So it's, we
It would be hard. It would be too heavy to
run
away away with that, but that's another story.
But yeah, we'd have to keep, because the gold belongs to the owners. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the people who we're storing it for. So we're not going to let you steal it. But yeah, I mean, there'll be ways for people to come in there and check out the vault, the gold, in our vaults and stuff like that. But remember, the gold is owned by the token holder. It's not owned by the custodian. The custodian has merely been hired to keep your gold safe for you. But what happens with the token is you're able to transfer ownership. This goes all the way back to the early days of the blacksmith. Before we even had banks, we had, a blacksmith would have the gold, and you would store your gold with this blacksmith, and the blacksmith would give you an IOU, like a coat check that said, hey, I've got your 100 ounces of gold here, and here's a claim ticket. And then you could take that and in town, and you could, buy a horse, and you could give the guy who's selling the horse, hey, I got gold with this blacksmith, and if you want, here's my receipt. I'll just sign it over to you, and now you own the gold. And he's like, yeah, fine. I don't need to go all the way down to the blacksmith and get the gold. I trust him. I recognize that. I'll take that, And that was, you would use the note instead of the actual gold. Well, that's even better with tokens, because with tokenized gold, you can instantly verify that it's a legitimate token, because it's on the blockchain. It has all of the validation of Bitcoin. It's all got a digital timestamp. All the transactions are verified. You don't have to worry that it's counterfeit, right? It has all those positive attributes that you find so attractive of Bitcoin. You'll have the same attributes with tokenized gold. The only difference is with tokenized gold, there's actually gold backing up the token. And yes, you have to trust that it's there. With Bitcoin, there's nothing backing it up. And you have to trust that people believe in it anyway. You have to trust that a bunch of people don't wake up and realize that it's nothing. And as long as they don't come to that realization, you're okay. But
so you're telling me, like, I
got nothing.
I got to rely on like 3,000 parties. And then because you said that like the gold is real because it moved on a blockchain, Bitcoin's not real, even though it moves on a blockchain and it's native to the blockchain. And then I also have to go and think to myself, oh, hey, like there's definitely a stash of gold that Peter owns. Like it still doesn't make any sense. And then if you have the tokenized gold, how do you prevent double spending? How do I prevent double spending? How do I know that if I had 1 ounce of gold and then this guy owns 1 ounce, that's not the same bar? You know what I mean?
Because all the tokens are tied. They're verified.
How do I verify that?
You can't double.
Do I have like a QR code on my specific bar of gold? Like it's like telling me I adopted a freaking penguin in Antarctica because I donate $5 a month. I don't know if that's really my freaking penguin. It's not my penguin. It can't.
So how do you think Tether works? How do you think when they issue tethers, right? Tethers are tokenized dollars, right? So Tether works. They know exactly how many tethers are out there. How many? The whole stable coin industry, which is all the rage right now in the cryptoverse, stable coins are the same concept as tokenized gold, right? They're identical. The only difference is what is backing up the token. Is it backed up by the dollar or is it
dollar,
backed up by
treasury
gold?
assets,
Yeah. But the principle is the same. You're trusting a third party to hold your asset, whether that asset is a fiat currency or whether that asset is gold. But yes, when there's Bitcoin, you don't have to trust somebody to hold something because there's nothing to hold, right?
Just like how,
You're
just like how with the tokenized gold, you're just
that a
trusting
pyramid doesn't
Peter
collapse.
you're just trusting Peter and his closet, and maybe he'll give
No,
us
I'm
a
not
tour,
hesi-
but
no,
we
I'm
don't
not
know.
keeping-
We don't know if really those gold bars are real gold bars,
Look,
or
I'm
if
not
it's tied directly to the coin. I just think
I'm
there's
not
too
going to
many
keep your
things.
gold. I'm not going to keep your gold in my closet, right? I'm going to have it in a vault with armed guards. It's going to be protected. I'm not going to keep your gold in my closet.
Okay, yes, your beautiful glorified closet. And so it's like, okay, well, I guess it's just like we got to trust Peter. We got to trust the guy that claims that he audited it, and we'll see if we
I would
ever
have
get
a
those
third party.
tours.
No, you could trust you could trust the big 8 accounting firm that audited it. You don't have to trust me.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. I guess it is what it is, Peter. You know, I do have liking for you, Peter, even though you insulted my intelligence this episode. It's fine.
No, you're not. I didn't say that you weren't smart. You're smart, right? But a lot of the people in Bitcoin are smart. I mean, most of them, at least the ones that got in earlier and kind of got in for the right reasons, right? They're smart. They're just wrong. They're just confused. They don't have enough experience to understand, right? I mean, there are a lot of Democrats who are smart, like give them an IQ test and they can have a high IQ, but you could be smart and believe in a lot of dumb things, right? You know, there are smart people that believe dumb things, you know.
Called me a Democrat. You know, I
didn't call you a Democrat. I didn't say you were,
or you compared
I said
me
you
to
were
one.
smart, but look, yeah, that's my point. There are intelligent Democrats, but they're just wrong. And there's also, a lot of Republicans nowadays are wrong too, because the stuff that the Republican Party stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But you're smart, but you're confused and you're wrong. And in a way you're, been victimized by groupthink because, you surround yourself with other Bitcoiners and you guys kind of like fuel this. You're in this echo chamber of Bitcoin, and you all got, yeah, this is great, and you got all the cult, all the phrases and the catchphrases and the whole community and everything, and you just get caught up in it. It's like you drank the Kool-Aid. There's nothing you can do about it. You're drunk.
That's
on the Kool-Aid.
insane to say. Again, there's people in third world countries using Bitcoin right now because they got nothing else.
Keep telling yourself that. Yeah.
What do you mean? Keep telling myself that? Look at all these articles that are coming out about even Uganda. The government said no internet because of elections. So people are transacting Bitcoin over Bluetooth because that's the only thing they got.
You're talking about a tiny fraction of the Bitcoin transactions. It's almost all speculative trading.
That, you know what, Peter?
By wealthy people.
If you were in a war zone, I would love to know if you would be carrying gold on your back when the government's trying to shoot you. So that's what I would wonder. But maybe I am proud to be part of the Kool-Aid. And let's say Bitcoin hits 200K in the next year. We can make a bet though. Like if you wanna, if Bitcoin hits 200K in the next year, you give me one Bitcoin. And
I don't have a Bitcoin, but you
could buy Bitcoin and give it to me.
Even if it hits 200K, it's only a double. What if everything else triples and Bitcoin only doubles, right? You're worse off. It's just a number.
So do you think
there's a good
do you think gold is going to outperform Bitcoin in the next 5 years? Do you think gold is going to outperform Bitcoin?
Yes, I do. It's outperformed it for the last 4, so why should the next 5 be any different?
What? The Bitcoin 4 years ago was like, what, 15K?
60,000, 69,000.
And then it went down to 15 and then bounced all the way back to over $100,000.
If you happen to buy that crash to 15,
just like if I bought the gold a few years ago and then now it's 4,000. Come on. Like this is like it's tit for tat.
All
Peter.
right.
You're tit for tatting.
Randy, the biggest Bitcoin buyer in the world is Michael Saylor for Strategy. He's been buying Bitcoin regularly for 5 years, right? Regular buyer. Bitcoin is now at about 95,000. His average price is 75,000 and change. He's barely ahead. Had he bought gold or silver, every time that Michael's strategy, every time he went into the market and bought Bitcoin, if he had bought gold or silver instead of Bitcoin, he'd have a lot more today. He is losing because he bought Bitcoin. In fact, he could have bought just the S&P 500, he'd be better off than he is with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has not been a good returning investment for people who have steadily bought it over the last 5 years. It's been a losing investment. Now, if you bought it 10 years ago, yes, that's a different story. But you can't go back and turn back the clock and keep looking at how well it did, back then. I'm looking at the more relevant recent past and saying, how has Bitcoin done ever since it's become a mainstream accepted investment? Ever since you've had all this publicity, all this hype, all the institutions involved, all the retail investors buying Bitcoin, how has Bitcoin performed? Bad. It's been a bad investment over that time period. And I think a lot of the people who bought Bitcoin over the last few years, who expected to make a lot of money and haven't, they're going to cash out. They're going to sell. And then the market's going to collapse because there's no buyers. Meanwhile, a lot of people have borrowed against their Bitcoin because they didn't want to sell it. Well, all of that borrowed Bitcoin is going to get sold, or the collateral, because the lenders are going to have to dump the Bitcoin into a collapsing market to secure their loans. So, I think you got lots of selling coming. You got the bankruptcy of Strategy that's inevitable. They're going to have to sell all their Bitcoin. This is a train wreck. You can't see it, again, because you're drunk on the Kool-Aid.
I'm drunk on the Kool-Aid because let's see. Gold was, so when I started my daily podcast, Bitcoin was around 15K. Gold at that same time, November 2022, I'm looking at a chart, around 1700. So Bitcoin was like 15,000, 16,000 when I started my show at that time. Gold was 1800. Now gold is 4,600. Do you think that Bitcoin versus that is obviously Bitcoin has outperformed gold if you're looking at the past 4 or 5 years?
If you look at that time frame, and if you bought your Bitcoin then and didn't buy any more, right? Let's say you bought your Bitcoin at 15,000 and just never bought any more, right?
But you DCA for long term. You're not DCAing for right now. Right. So again, that argument doesn't make sense.
If people have been dollar cost averaging into their Bitcoin over that time period, they're probably better off in gold or silver because they probably bought a lot of their Bitcoin at 100,000, 90,000, 70,000. They're not up much or they're down, but if you've been buying gold and silver all along, you're way up on all your purchases. You don't have purchases where you're way down. So most of the money that's in Bitcoin, I think people are underwater or close to it. But wait till the next big drop. Wait till we have another big crash in Bitcoin, which it has. So wait till Bitcoin goes back down to 50,000 or 30,000 or 20,000. Now see how much profits people have left, right? Hardly anybody will have any profits in Bitcoin if it goes to 20 or 30,000. Even though they may have bought some lower, the average cost of the current owner of Bitcoin is much higher than that price.
All right. Well, I don't think we're getting anywhere. I think we're going in a bunch of circles here. But what's
your average cost? Do you know what your average cost on your Bitcoin is? All the Bitcoin that you've bought over your life?
To me, it doesn't matter, Peter, because I'm buying Bitcoin for my future kids. I think this is generational.
Your kids aren't going to care about Bitcoin. They're not even going to know about Bitcoin.
Of course they will. I mean,
you're going to keep reminding them of how mommy lost all her money when she was young. That's going to be your bedtime story, so they'll know about Bitcoin.
Or maybe I'll just tell them about this guy Peter Schiff that was shilling gold while Bitcoin was just on the biggest generational run.
Hopefully they'll know about me.
Yeah, maybe it'll just be a folktale at that point, unless your son Spencer goes ahead and takes your place.
The guy that warned everybody to get out of their Bitcoin.
Yeah, listen. Maybe
listen to Peter Schiff.
Maybe you'll be our savior, Peter, and bless your heart for it. But ultimately,
I'm trying.
Listen, Peter. I wish I could give you a hug right now. I wish I could give you a hug. It seems like I don't mean to stress you out, Peter. So we're gonna call it quits and spread peace and love throughout the world. Ain't that right? And guys, if you have not yet, get your market cipher. First 40 people get 40% off using code GOLD, and that was specifically for you, Peter. We have special codes for you. Now, Peter,
go to tgold.com and get ready for your tokenized gold, or go to Schiff Gold and get some real gold and silver. Or check out my asset management company, Europe Pacific Asset Management. We do, portfolio management. I manage mutual funds, real investments that you need to consider especially if you have, quite a bit in Bitcoin. You got to diversify. And don't forget to listen to my podcast if you're not a regular listener at schiffradio.com or my YouTube channel. And, follow me on X or wherever I am on social media.
Yes, all his links are in the description.
Important content.
Yes, I put all of your information in the description of the video. I was going to give you a chance to plug your stuff, but you went right ahead and did it. So,
yeah, I know. I've been around the block a few times, so I know to get the plugs in.
Listen, you're a man of the media. You've been going on TV since before I was born, and that's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Now, I want you to give us a closing thought here, and it could be about anything. It could be about your girlfriends in college. It could be about, your favorite burger. It could be about the love you have in your heart for me. I don't know. Let me know what you're thinking. What's the last thing you want our viewers here to know?
Look, I already expressed that, and that is, if you take one thing away from this discussion, it's that maybe, just maybe, Bitcoin isn't going to go to the moon. Maybe it's a passing fad. And let me take some chips off the table. Let me make some more conservative investments just in case Peter Schiff is right. I mean, I've been right before. So just give me the benefit of the doubt and hedge. You don't have to sell all your Bitcoin. I mean, personally, I don't own any Bitcoin. I don't have no interest in it. But if you want to have a small amount of Bitcoin, because just in case, all right. but don't have too concentrated a bet on such a risky asset. That's what I want people to take away.
All right, guys, your financial advice from Peter. We're looking forward to our vault tour. I'm very excited for it. So when you open that vault, you call me, you let me know. We're going to do a live stream in the vault. You're going to walk us through. Is that correct?
Yeah. Meanwhile, open up an account now. Get a little taste of it. Get your T-Go old account set up.
All right, guys, you heard it here. There's going to be a tour of the vault, and if he doesn't come through, then something's a little wrong over there. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. I appreciate every single one of you guys. If you haven't yet, smash the like, subscribe, share this out with friends. I do go live Monday through Friday at 9:45 a.m. Eastern for the Daily Zest podcast with your favorite news, political, macroeconomic chaos, and of course, Bitcoin and crypto. Stay blessed, everybody. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.
All right, take care. Talk for a long time.